What you're about to witness might be the most disrespectful, most calculated, most personal attack in WWE history, and I need you to stay with me because when I tell you who's responsible for hospitalizing CM Punk for months, who's been lurking in the shadows playing mind games, who had the audacity to think he could end the career of the best in the world and get away with it, your blood is going to boil. Austin Theory. Let that name sink in for a moment. Austin Theory, the same guy who takes more selfies than he lands successful title defenses, the same overhyped, overpromoted golden boy who's been handed opportunity after opportunity despite proving time and time again that he doesn't belong in the same conversation as the legends of this business. This man thought he could take out CM Punk and walk away clean. Well, Friday Night Smackdown just became the night where karma caught up with the most arrogant superstar on the roster, and what CM Punk did to him was nothing short of poetic justice. But before we get into the absolute destruction that unfolded, before we talk about how Punk dismantled Theory piece by piece in front of the entire world, we need to understand why this moment matters, why this revelation has the entire wrestling community in an uproar, and why Austin Theory just made the biggest mistake of his pathetic career. For months, we've been asking the same question. Who attacked CM Punk? Who was the coward that blindsided the Second City Saint in the parking lot, leaving him broken and battered, forcing him out of action during what should have been the peak of his return run? The speculation has been endless. Was it someone from his past seeking revenge? Was it a new enemy trying to make a name for themselves? Was it orchestrated by someone in management who wanted Punk gone? The theories have been running wild, and every single week, we've been left without answers, watching Punk's absence create this massive void in WWE programming. Meanwhile, Austin Theory has been walking around with this smug look on his face, this insufferable confidence that made you want to reach through your screen and wipe that smirk off his face yourself. He's been cutting promos about being the future, about how the old generation needs to step aside, about how he's everything WWE needs going forward. Every single promo felt like a slap in the face to everyone who's ever respected this business, everyone who understands that you don't just get handed respect, you earn it through blood, sweat, and tears in that ring. The wrestling world has been patient, maybe too patient, waiting for answers, waiting for justice, waiting for someone to step up and expose whoever was responsible for one of the most heinous attacks in recent memory. And then Friday Night Smackdown happened, and everything changed in an instant. The show started normally enough, you had your opening segments, your standard matches, nothing that would indicate we were about to witness something that would trend worldwide for the next 72 hours. Austin Theory was scheduled to cut a promo, another one of his self-congratulatory speeches where he talks about his potential and his future and how everyone should just accept that he's the next big thing. He walked out with that championship wrapped around his waist like he'd actually earned the right to carry it, with that smile that makes you question how someone so young could be so delusional about their own importance. He grabbed the microphone, and he started doing what he always does, talking about himself, inflating his own ego, making claims that his resume simply doesn't support. But then something happened that nobody saw coming. The lights flickered. That familiar static sound filled the arena. And then, that music hit. Cult of Personality exploded through the speakers, and the entire building erupted in a way that can only happen when CM Punk makes an appearance. The crowd knew what this meant. After months of absence, after months of speculation and rumors about his condition, about whether he'd ever return, about whether his career might be over, CM Punk was back. But this wasn't a celebratory return. You could see it in his eyes the moment he appeared at the top of the ramp. This wasn't the CM Punk who comes out smiling, who feeds off the energy of the crowd, who takes his time soaking in the moment. This was a man on a mission, a man possessed by a singular purpose, a man who had identified his target and was ready to exact the most brutal form of revenge imaginable. Austin Theory's face told you everything you needed to know. The color drained from his cheeks. That confident smirk evaporated in microseconds. His body language shifted from cocky champion to terrified child who just realized he's been caught red-handed. He started backing up, shaking his head, holding his hands up as if he could somehow talk his way out of what was about to happen. But CM Punk wasn't interested in words. Punk wasn't interested in explanations or excuses or hearing Theory try to deny what they both knew to be true. Punk stormed down that ramp with an intensity we haven't seen from him in years, maybe ever, and the moment he slid into that ring, all hell broke loose in the most beautiful, most satisfying way possible. The first punch landed square on Theory's jaw, and you could feel the impact through your television screen. This wasn't a worked punch, this wasn't your standard WWE strike where they're protecting each other and making it look good for the cameras. This was CM Punk unleashing months of frustration, months of pain, months of anger on the man responsible for putting him on the shelf. Theory tried to fight back, he threw a couple of desperate strikes, but it was like watching an amateur boxer step into the ring with a seasoned professional. Punk was operating on a completely different level, fueled by rage and revenge, and Theory had absolutely no answer for what was coming his way. Punk backed him into the corner and just started unloading, lefts and rights, body shots and headshots, each one landing with sickening precision, each one representing another day Punk spent recovering, another opportunity Theory thought he'd stolen, another moment of satisfaction Theory thought he'd gotten away with. The referees tried to intervene, because that's what they're supposed to do, that's their job, but CM Punk wasn't having any of it. He shoved them aside like they were children, like they were inconveniences preventing him from completing his mission. Security rushed the ring, at least 6 or 7 guys in those bright yellow shirts, thinking they could somehow contain a man who had been waiting months for this exact moment. Punk fought through them like they weren't even there, tossing them out of the ring, hitting them with whatever he could get his hands on, never taking his eyes off Austin Theory, who was now cowering in the corner, bleeding from his mouth, his championship lying somewhere on the mat forgotten and irrelevant because titles don't matter when you're fighting for something much more personal. What happened next is the part that really drove home how calculated this attack was, how much thought Punk had put into this moment. He could have just beaten Theory senseless and called it a night, could have delivered a GTS and left him laying, could have taken the quick satisfaction and walked away. But that's not what happened. Punk dragged Theory to the center of the ring, grabbed a microphone that had been dropped during the chaos, and with Theory barely conscious at his feet, CM Punk did something that sent shockwaves through the entire wrestling industry. He looked directly into the camera, directly at everyone watching around the world, and he said 5 words that confirmed what we'd all been suspecting but hoping wasn't true. "I know it was you." The arena went absolutely nuclear. The crowd was chanting his name so loud you couldn't hear anything else. Social media exploded instantly with people sharing clips, with people expressing their shock, with people demanding to know more details about how Punk figured it out, about what Theory's motivation was, about what this means for both of their futures. But Punk wasn't done. He dropped the microphone on Theory's chest and then proceeded to lock in the Anaconda Vice, the devastating submission hold that has made so many superstars tap out over the years. Theory was screaming, his face turning purple, his hand desperately reaching for ropes that were just inches too far away. The referees were yelling at Punk to release the hold, security was trying to pull him off, and Punk just kept cranking on that submission, kept applying more and more pressure, kept making Theory pay for every single day Punk spent unable to compete. When Punk finally released the hold, Theory wasn't moving. Medical staff rushed into the ring, people were checking on him, and you could see the concern on their faces as they assessed whatever damage had been done. Meanwhile, CM Punk stood in the corner, chest heaving, knuckles bloody, looking down at the carnage he'd created with absolutely zero remorse. The message was clear and it was loud. You come after CM Punk, you try to end his career, you think you can take him out and face no consequences, and this is what happens to you. This is the price you pay for crossing the best in the world. Now, let's talk about why Austin Theory would do something this stupid in the first place, because that's the question everyone's asking. What could possibly motivate someone to attack CM Punk? What did Theory have to gain from taking out one of the most respected, most dangerous, most vindictive performers in wrestling history? Some people are saying it was about jealousy, about Theory seeing Punk getting all this attention after his return while Theory was being relegated to mid-card feuds despite holding a championship. Some are speculating that someone higher up put Theory up to it, that this was orchestrated by people in power who wanted Punk gone because he's too outspoken, too willing to call out the company's mistakes, too much of a wild card to control. Others think Theory genuinely believed that taking out Punk would elevate his own status, that people would see him as this dangerous threat who took down a legend, that it would somehow legitimize his position as a top guy. But here's what I think really happened, and this is going to make you even angrier. Austin Theory attacked CM Punk because he's been given everything in his career without having to earn any of it, and somewhere along the way, he started actually believing his own hype. He started thinking that he was on the same level as Punk, that he deserved to be mentioned in the same breath as the legends, that he had somehow earned the right to decide who stays and who goes. Theory has been told he's special since day one, he's been protected in booking, he's been given opportunities that other people grind for years to get, and instead of humbling himself and learning from the veterans around him, instead of respecting the business and the people who built it, he let that favoritism go straight to his head. He looked at CM Punk, someone who clawed his way to the top, who fought against the system for years, who earned every single accolade through pure talent and determination, and Theory thought he could shortcut his way to that same level of respect by taking Punk out. That's the most insulting part of this entire situation. It's not just that Theory attacked Punk, it's why he attacked Punk. It's the arrogance, the entitlement, the complete lack of respect for what CM Punk represents in this industry. Punk is the guy who main event pay-per-views when Theory was still in high school. Punk is the guy who had legendary feuds with John Cena, The Undertaker, Brock Lesnar, The Rock. Punk is the guy who walked away from WWE at the peak of his career because he refused to compromise his principles, and then came back years later on his own terms. And Austin Theory, with his limited moveset and his Instagram addiction and his complete inability to connect with the audience on any meaningful level, thought he could be the one to write Punk's final chapter. The locker room reaction to all of this has been fascinating to watch unfold. Multiple wrestlers have been tweeting and posting about what happened on Smackdown, and the overwhelming sentiment is satisfaction that Theory finally got what was coming to him. You have veterans who've been in the business for decades praising Punk for handling things the old school way, for not going to management or human resources or trying to settle this through official channels, but instead taking matters into his own hands and delivering justice personally. You have younger wrestlers who are probably taking notes, understanding that there are still consequences in this business for disrespect, that you can't just attack people and expect to walk away clean. Even people who've had issues with Punk in the past are acknowledging that what he did was justified, that Theory crossed a line that warranted exactly the kind of response he received. What makes this whole situation even more complex is the question of what happens next. WWE is in an impossible position now. Do they punish CM Punk for what was essentially a justified retaliation? Do they fine him, suspend him, strip him of any opportunities because he took justice into his own hands instead of letting the company handle it through their internal processes? Or do they acknowledge that Austin Theory got exactly what he deserved, that sometimes the system fails and people need to handle their own business, that wrestling is ultimately about settling disputes in the ring, and what Punk did was the most wrestling solution possible to this problem? The company has remained surprisingly quiet since Smackdown ended, no official statements, no announcements about disciplinary action, no clarity on whether Theory will be medically cleared to compete or how long he might be out. That silence speaks volumes about how uncertain they are about how to proceed. From a storytelling perspective, this opens up so many possibilities moving forward. Does this lead to an extended feud between Punk and Theory, where Theory tries to prove he can actually hang with Punk in a fair fight? Does Theory align himself with other people who have issues with Punk, creating some kind of faction designed specifically to take Punk out once and for all? Does someone else step up and reveal that they were actually pulling the strings behind Theory's attack, that Theory was just a pawn in a larger conspiracy? Does Punk go on a rampage through the roster, systematically destroying anyone else who might have been involved or who might be considering crossing him? The narrative potential here is enormous, and depending on how WWE handles this over the next few months, we could be looking at one of the defining storylines of this entire era. But let's zoom out for a second and talk about what this means for both of their careers in the bigger picture. For CM Punk, this was a statement of dominance, a reminder to everyone that he's still one of the most dangerous, most intense, most compelling performers in the entire industry. He's been back for a while now, but there have been questions about whether he's lost a step, whether the injuries and the time away have diminished his ability to perform at the highest level, whether he still has that edge that made him so special in the first place. Friday Night SmackDown answered all of those questions definitively. Punk isn't just back, he's back with a vengeance, he's motivated in a way we haven't seen in years, and he just demonstrated that he's willing to cross lines and break rules when someone pushes him too far. That makes him more dangerous than ever, not just physically but creatively, because now everyone knows that Punk operates by his own code and isn't afraid of consequences when it comes to settling scores. For Austin Theory, this is potentially career-defining in the worst possible way. He's going to be forever remembered as the guy who thought he could take out CM Punk and instead got absolutely humiliated on international television. Every time someone mentions his name now, this is going to come up. Every time he cuts a promo trying to assert his dominance or his credibility, people are going to remember that night on SmackDown when CM Punk made him look like an amateur who didn't belong in the same building, let alone the same ring. Theory has been trying to establish himself as a main event player, as someone the company can build around for the next decade, and instead he just became a cautionary tale about what happens when you disrespect the wrong person. Coming back from this is going to require a complete reinvention of his character, an acknowledgement of his failures and his arrogance, a humble approach to rebuilding his reputation from the ground up. And honestly, based on everything we've seen from Theory so far, I'm not confident he has the self-awareness or the work ethic to pull that off. The fan reaction has been overwhelmingly in support of CM Punk, which tells you everything you need to know about how people feel about Austin Theory. Wrestling fans are usually pretty divided on controversial incidents. You'll have people defending both sides, arguing about who was right and who was wrong, debating the morality and the appropriateness of people's actions. But in this case, the response has been almost unanimous celebration that Theory got destroyed, that Punk delivered the kind of old-school justice that people have been craving in an era where everything feels sanitized and controlled. Social media has been flooded with memes of Theory's terrified face when Punk's music hit, with clips of the beating set to different songs, with people photoshopping Theory into humiliating situations. The merchandise opportunities alone from this moment are going to be insane. Punk is going to have shirts made referencing this. Fans are going to create their own designs celebrating what happened. This is going to be talked about and referenced for years to come. What's also interesting is how this affects the broader landscape of WWE programming. CM Punk coming back in this capacity, willing to cross lines and deliver this kind of brutality, raises the stakes for everyone else on the roster. Suddenly, feuds feel more real, more intense, more personal, because people are seeing that there can be actual consequences that go beyond standard wrestling matches. Other wrestlers are going to have to up their game to compete with the intensity Punk is bringing. Other storylines are going to feel less important by comparison unless they match the emotional investment people have in seeing Punk get his revenge. WWE has been criticized for years about feeling too scripted, too predictable, too safe in their storytelling, and what happened on SmackDown was the complete opposite of all of that. It felt raw, it felt real, it felt like something genuinely unpredictable was happening, and that's exactly what the product needs more of. There's also the question of whether this was a worked shoot or a shoot-worked situation, whether everything that happened was carefully planned and orchestrated by WWE creative or whether Punk went off script and did his own thing. The cynical part of me wants to say that everything in WWE is planned down to the smallest detail, that what we witnessed was a carefully choreographed segment designed to look spontaneous and violent. But the realist in me, the part that knows CM Punk's history and his willingness to blur the lines between reality and fiction, thinks there's a possibility that at least some of what happened was Punk taking liberties, Punk deciding in the moment to escalate things beyond what was planned, Punk letting his legitimate frustration with theories push and his character inform his actions in the ring. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle, a planned confrontation that Punk made more intense and more personal than anyone expected. Regardless of the behind-the-scenes reality, what matters is the on-screen result and the impact it's had on the audience. People are engaged in a way they haven't been in months, maybe years. People are talking about WWE, sharing clips, debating what happens next, making predictions about future developments. The ratings for Smackdown are going to reflect this massive interest. You're going to see a spike not just in the overnight numbers but in the sustained viewership over the next few weeks as people tune in to see how this story continues. You're going to see increased ticket sales for live events because people want to be there in person if something else crazy happens. You're going to see merchandise flying off the shelves because people want to show their support for CM Punk and their disdain for Austin Theory. From a business perspective, what happened on SmackDown was exactly what WWE needed to generate buzz and momentum heading into their next major event cycle. Now, I want to address something that's going to be controversial but needs to be said. Austin Theory is not ready for this level of spotlight, not ready for this level of intensity, not ready to be in a program with someone like CM Punk. Everything about his career so far has been about potential and promise, about what he might become rather than what he currently is. He's athletic, he's young, he has some decent matches when he's working with the right opponents, but he doesn't have the psychology, the storytelling ability, the microphone skills, or the credibility to make people believe he belongs in the same stratosphere as CM Punk. WWE has been trying to force Theory down people's throats for over a year now, pushing him into prominent positions, giving him championships, featuring him in major storylines, and the audience has consistently rejected him because they can see through the smoke and mirrors. They can tell when someone is being artificially elevated versus when someone has organically earned their position, and Theory is the epitome of artificial elevation. What's frustrating for a lot of longtime wrestling fans is watching someone like Austin Theory get opportunities that other, more deserving wrestlers would kill for. You have guys in NXT and on the independent scene who have been grinding for years, perfecting their craft, putting on incredible matches, connecting with audiences, building genuine fan bases, and they're stuck in developmental or working for smaller promotions because they don't fit whatever mold WWE is looking for. Meanwhile, Theory gets hired straight out of developmental, gets immediately paired with top stars, gets protected in booking, gets championship reigns, all because someone in management thinks he has the right look or the right age or the right potential. That's not how wrestling is supposed to work. Wrestling is supposed to be a meritocracy where talent rises to the top based on ability and connection with the audience, not because executives made an arbitrary decision about who they want to push. The beating CM Punk delivered wasn't just about revenge for a physical attack, it was about sending a message to everyone in WWE, everyone in the wrestling industry, and everyone watching at home that shortcuts and politics and favoritism eventually catch up with you. You can be protected in booking for only so long before reality sets in, before someone calls your bluff, before you're exposed as not being ready for the position you've been placed in. Austin Theory has been living on borrowed time, coasting on the goodwill of people in power who see something in him that the audience doesn't, and CM Punk just collected on the debt in the most public, most humiliating way imaginable. This is the correction the wrestling world has been waiting for, the moment when someone finally stood up and said enough is enough. This kid doesn't deserve to be here yet, and I'm going to prove it to everyone watching. Looking at this situation from Theory's perspective for just a moment, it's hard not to feel a tiny bit of sympathy for the position he's been put in. He didn't ask to be pushed too hard too fast, he didn't demand championship reigns and main event spots before he was ready, he's just a young wrestler who's been doing what management tells him to do and accepting the opportunities he's been given. The problem is that he hasn't shown enough humility or self-awareness to recognize that he's being overpushed, that he needs to go back to the drawing board and develop his skills before being thrust into the spotlight. Instead, he's embraced the favoritism, he's leaned into the arrogance, he's played the character of someone who deserves all this success when his resume simply doesn't support that narrative. And that's what makes it hard to feel too bad for him, because he's had plenty of opportunities to acknowledge his shortcomings, to ask for more time to develop, to defer to more experienced wrestlers, and he's chosen not to do any of those things. The wrestling industry has a long history of young wrestlers being pushed too hard too fast and imploding under the pressure. We've seen it happen repeatedly over the decades, talented performers who had all the physical tools but weren't mentally or emotionally ready for the main event spotlight, who crumbled when the expectations became too heavy, who flamed out and became cautionary tales instead of success stories. Austin Theory is dangerously close to becoming another name on that list unless something changes dramatically in how he approaches his career and how WWE approaches booking him. What happened on SmackDown could actually be the best thing that ever happens to Theory if it forces a reset, if it humbles him enough to go back and do the work necessary to become a legitimate main event talent rather than someone who's just playing that role without earning it. CM Punk has always been someone who speaks truth to power, who isn't afraid to call out injustice or hypocrisy, who uses his platform to highlight issues that other people are too afraid to address. What he did on SmackDown was the physical manifestation of all those principles, taking someone who represents everything wrong with modern wrestling, the shortcuts and the politics and the unearned opportunities, and delivering a violent reality check that the entire world got to witness. This is vintage CM Punk. This is the performer who captivated audiences for years with his willingness to push boundaries and challenge the status quo. This is why people were so excited about his return in the first place. We wanted to see him shake things up. We wanted to see him bring that energy and that edge back to WWE programming, and that's exactly what he delivered. The question now becomes, where does this story go from here? Because while Friday Night SmackDown gave us this incredible cathartic moment of revenge, that can't be the end of the story. Austin Theory is going to want payback, he's going to want redemption, he's going to need to somehow salvage his career and his reputation after being destroyed so thoroughly. Does he come back even more dangerous, having learned from this experience and evolved as a performer and as a character? Does he spiral into obsession with taking Punk down, becoming increasingly unhinged and desperate in his attempts to even the score? Does he align himself with others who have been victimized by Punk over the years, creating a coalition specifically designed to overwhelm and defeat Punk through numbers? All of these directions have potential, all of them could lead to compelling television, but only if WWE commits to the long-term storytelling and doesn't just drop this after a few weeks like they do with so many other angles. CM Punk vs. Austin Theory has the potential to be a defining feud for both of them if handled correctly. For Punk, it's an opportunity to elevate another performer while also reinforcing his own status as one of the all-time greats who can still go at the highest level. For Theory, it's a chance to finally prove that he belongs, that he can hang with a legend, that the faith WWE has shown in him wasn't misplaced. But that's only possible if Theory rises to the occasion, if he uses this as motivation to get better rather than an excuse to complain about being treated unfairly. The ball is entirely in his court now, he can either sink or swim, and the entire wrestling world is watching to see which way he goes. What Friday Night SmackDown proved beyond any doubt is that CM Punk is still one of the most compelling, most important figures in all of professional wrestling, and Austin Theory just found out the hard way why you don't mess with the best in the world. This is going to be talked about for years, this is going to be shown in highlight packages forever, this is the kind of moment that reminds you why you fell in love with wrestling in the first place. So make sure you go back and watch that entire segment if you haven't already, make sure you share it with everyone you know who's even remotely interested in wrestling, because what we witnessed wasn't just another angle or another beatdown, it was history being made, and you're going to want to remember where you were when CM Punk made Austin Theory pay for the biggest mistake of his career.